One of my favourite things about living in outback Queensland is the large amount of characters that you can find in such a small space of population. And today we're very lucky to have Janeece Thompson, a proud Bidra and Karakara woman from Barcaldine. She is the manager of Central West Aboriginal Corporation, and she's a leader within the Barcaldine community, and of course a mother and a wife. So welcome, Janeece.
Thank you very much, Aaron. Pleasure to be here.
Excellent. So, Janeece, recently we were talking and you were telling me about growing up and with mum, and she would make her own clothes to go out each Friday night, and for you and your siblings, which I think is just like such a cool idea, and you don't see that anywhere anymore. Tell us about like growing up, because you grew up in Bundaberg.
No, we grew up here, but Mum grew up in Bundaberg. And so she married my father and came out to Barcaldine to live. And so it was, from her words, a very eye-opening experience. She says when she first came to Barkey, there were just goats everywhere. There were goats on top of cars, in the streets, in the local hotels. So it was a real shock for her to come from the city, a beach place to out here. So, yeah, but Mum was the first woman to play in a brass band. She did music, she did opera singing, she played the piano. And so she did a lot of that sort of stuff, and sewing, and she learned how to speak. Her parents were keen about the art of speech, so she did all of these wonderful things when she was young. And every Friday night she would play at the local halls or go to dances where she would play the piano with her siblings. And but she used to sew, and so she would sew all of her clothes. And she tells stories of, everyone was always waiting for her to turn up at the dances and to see what, clothing she would have made in the week, which is pretty unique and expensive back in the day. So when she got married and she came out here, and it was a culture shock, and Mum always wore stockings and gloves and all that sort of stuff. So the people in the bush didn't necessarily do that. So it was a bit of an adjustment for her to live in outback Queensland. And of course then she had us kids. My dad, which is a pretty unique story, he managed a sheep station. So we lived out of town on a property for most of our life, managing the sheep, and he would, and we had a house out there, so he was like the foreman or the station hand, station master. And Dad was managing this property before he actually had the right to vote in Australia. So it's his story is just fascinating. And as a kid, you don't realise the importance until later on, and you start learning the history. So they lived out on the property. I remember Dad would grow all his own veggies. Mum, the boys, my brothers would milk the cows, and we'd have fresh milk for brekkie. We'd catch the bus to town for school. They were very, very passionate about education and making sure that we made it right through school. So growing up in Barcaldine was pretty amazing. And then we rode in all the shows, like you'd have the shows. So we had ponies, and we'd ride in all the and even that was pretty amazing for an Aboriginal family to be able to compete at that level. Show jumping, show riding back in those days was pretty, when you look back now, it was pretty impressive. So that's
when I think about, when I hear about these stories about back in the, I'm assuming the 70s, don't
yes.
don't execute me for revealing perhaps your age. But when I think back about the relations between Aboriginals and Europeans back in those days, it seems quite more progressive than maybe the rest of the country was. Did you feel that when you were growing up?
Oh, definitely. Like, and there was no colour, like we were all just great mates. And like our parents made sure that we didn't see our colour as a disadvantage. Because my dad was actually born on a place called Lake Dolly, and it was like a fringe camp just out past the airdrome. And Dad used to always say I was born out there under a tree. And like as a kid, you think, oh yeah, sure. And then it wasn't until later that we got his birth certificate, and it has, born Lake Dolly. So all the stories that he'd tell us about being born out there was correct and real. But as a kid, I used to think we were like the richest family in Barkie because we had property and we lived by the lake and it was very prestigious. But in actual fact, it was a fringe camp and Aboriginal people weren't allowed to live in town. That's why we lived out there. And I once said to Mum, why didn't Dad ever tell us that, that's why we lived there, because we weren't allowed to live in town, or he wasn't. More so, by the time we were born, we were in town. And Mum said he didn't want you to ever know that you're any different to anyone else.
Yeah, right.
So, and he didn't want you to be angry with the fact that that's what happened to his generation and the generation before. So, but like back in the day, we were just there was no race. There was just, young kids being, bushies out in the bush and go on the river, and there was no,
Really,
no real difference.
You were living this actually luxurious life in a house built by the lake, and thinking that you guys were the best, but really, you guys really were living in the lap of luxury.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's right. And that's where, Dad grew up, out on this property. I remember Mum telling the story of the house that we actually is our family home, and Mum still is with us, and that's where she lives. But the property owner that Dad worked for went guarantor for him to buy that house that we now live in. Like, we're talking the 70s, so for a property owner to go guarantor for an Aboriginal man who's a stockman, that's pretty special and pretty amazing. So, you'd be pretty hard pressed for anyone now to go guarantor for anyone to buy a home, especially. So that's the relationship that we were privileged to, and we grew up with. So,
and then when you grew up, when you're going to school, did you go to university? How did you? I'm trying to paint a picture of how you came from there to like manager of Central West Aboriginal Corporation.
Yeah.
What was your teenage years and later schooling life?
Okay. So we went to school. We moved to town in about 76, I think, when my younger brother was born. So we moved into town. And 6 kids. Mum put us all through school. Dad worked on the council. My mum was a cleaner at the school. She so fondly says, I scrub toilets to get you kids through an education, which is technically true. So we owe all of our, our success to her and our father for what they did for us. So when I finished year 12, I got accepted into university for teaching and I've always wanted to be a social worker, just working, helping people. But we didn't have the money for me to, and back then there was no government assistance as there is today, no scholarships. So we didn't have the money to send me to university. So I just went working. So I worked at Main Roads as soon as I left school. And that really grounded me to life as a worker, and I work with some amazing people that instilled that administration role with me. So I did that. Then I moved to Rockhampton and worked through government agencies. And then my mum and dad, who started the Central West Aboriginal Corporation, 1976. So dad had passed on. I'd moved to Gympie by then, and then a job came up to manage the corporation. And so I just had my first son, and me and my partner, Bob, we decided to come home, and I have been here ever since with the corporation. So it's been a journey. I think it's about 27 years that I've been as the manager of the Central West Aboriginal Corporation. So wonderful people, wonderful kids, wonderful experiences as well. So, yeah.
It's such a great opportunity to have shaped the community across all those years, I suppose. What was the original purpose of the Central West Aboriginal Corporation? Why was that set up in the first place, and what were the goals? And are they still the same goals that we see today, or has that shifted?
No, it's incredible because the vision from the old people in 76, and I remember as a kid, mum and dad would have these people elders that would just turn up, and they'd have these meetings that I had no idea what they were talking about, on the front lawn. And there was no money back then to bring people together. There was no such thing as travel allowance or anything like that. So these people from across the region came for a common cause, which was essentially housing, because Aboriginal people found it very difficult to obtain rentals back in the 70s, 60s, 70s. So the government at the time set up these corporations, Aboriginal corporations. And so the aims and the goals and the objectives was things that we're still doing today, like housing, education, health, economic development, and the continuation of our culture. So what I'm proud about Central West Aboriginal Corporation, there's only two organisations that were incorporated back in the 70s in Queensland, that are still thriving. We're probably the oldest one that's still operational, and so we started off humbly with, I think the first house they bought was over in Blackall. So the region is pretty big. So now we have property in Blackall, property in Alpha, property in Buckalda as well. So, and then of course our culture continues, with different funding programs that we've been able to secure. We do revival of our art and our language, and we also do sport and recreation, like trying to get our kids healthy, trying to get them off their computers. But because we're in such a small community, everything that we do for the whole community. We don't just say, oh, well, let's do basketball for Aboriginal kids. So we do basketball for the whole community because that's what gives us the strength. And our kids are, part of the normal. I shouldn't say normal, but I mean we are part of this community as a whole, not a separate entity. So
Yeah, that's what I see now, from my modern understanding of the Central West Aboriginal Corporation, is lots of community involvement activities. Like you said, the basketball. You've got ceramics. You've got a farm out on near the weir. Like a lot of. I suppose that original thing about getting the housing and making sure that Indigenous housing was looked after, and that's just expanded now to all these other programs. And I think it's really commendable that you've been able to do that and have all these things under your arm. One of the projects that I really like is the partnership with Red Ridge, where you guys and other people within the communities have created artwork and then printed that onto garments. And then that seems to be a great way to get your stories and artwork and the message out into the world. How did that come about, that partnership and that idea? And how's that going?
Yeah, well, Red Ridge is an organisation made up. Um, I think their board is made up of the 7 regional councils from around the region. It's a strong art board, and the CEO of Red Ridge is a very dear friend, Louise Campbell. She's been there for many years. And so we've done dabbled in different sorts of art projects. Like we might do some leather workshops and different things like that over the years. So then Red Ridge with Annie Joycey and Annie Jean Crombie, they're from Birdsville, and they started to put their paintings, they're incredible artists, onto fabric, and they started to dabble in that. So they were really, for us, the pioneers of doing canvas to catwalk. And so they, Two Sisters Talking, I think, is their branding. And so they did a lot of this. And then Annie Joycey had said, we want to try and bring other people, other Indigenous people, on this journey with us. So they asked CWAC to come on board. So a few of our artists have now designed garments and did our artwork that is now part of the label. So Red Ridge is a fashion label, and our artwork is slowly getting out there. So there's actually 5 artists from Barcaldine that have got their artwork as part of the label as well. So, and it's actually a unique thing for us to do, because I tell this beautiful story of the sun and moon. It's a Dreamtime story that was told to us, to me, about 30 years ago. And for all that time, I've been sharing this story. And my son said to me one day, "Mum, have you ever written this story down, or have you ever, once you pass on, the story's gone?" And so now we've made a theatrical performance. We've got it in a book, but the artwork has been, the theatrical performance is art that has been transformed into garments that make up the characters for this story. And so that story will live on, and the artwork will live on. And so that's just one Dreamtime story. So, because traditionally Aboriginal stories are oral stories, and that's how our culture is, we share. But now you've got all this digital technology, and you've got, fabrics. So this is a new age for storytelling and for sharing our culture with the world. So
That's
yeah,
it. I was there. Wow, when it was Matia.
yeah, Matcha.
Matia was first produced, and it's actually such a great story, and it's not just for Indigenous people. It's a good story overall.
Yes.
So I really enjoyed that. Um,
And you played a vital role in that, because you know, your photography, your videos, that is what's given us recognition. So you need to we take our hat off to you too, because we just ring you up and say, come and do it. But yeah, your stuff, and we've actually been asked if we would consider putting that performance on in some shape or form for the Olympics. So, and that's from your vision, and it otherwise would just be an oral story.
Again, you'd be telling the story of the production,
Yes.
rather than being able to physically watch it again and then see it. Yeah.
Yes.
No, you're right. I
Yes.
never thought of it like that.
Yeah.
I think that the fact that you came up with that is incredible and inspiring. But I also know that you have designed one of the garments, one of the things, in partnership with your mum.
Yes.
Tell me, how does that feel to have that garment out there in the world and people actively wearing it right now?
Oh wow.
It's pretty incredible.
Yeah, it is, and it's something that that is going to be a special memory for me and my mum. Even like we collaborated on the art piece, the colours. When I say collaborated, we argued. She had different visions of colour. Oh, because our story was it was in the drought at the time that we did the artwork, and I was trying to say how beautiful Australia is, even in drought. Like, it is a little bit, well, obviously it is very depressing, especially for people on the land. But if you can find some beauty in anything and in the environment, it's pretty incredible. So we were sort of talking about the water holes, and so when the water holes are flowing, they're beautiful, vibrant colours. But in the drought, they stay dormant, and so you have the browns and the ochre colours, so the browns and the golds and the oranges, but still they are still beautiful in the landscape. So that's how Mum and I collaborated on our art piece. So it's the browns and it's the golds and it's the water holes in the dry. And so, yeah, you're right. Once we saw that come to life in fabric, and once you see someone wearing your design, it's the most, exhilarating experience because it's something that you've created. But the better thing is that someone actually appreciates what you do. And one person once said to me, you know you're an accomplished artist when someone buys something that you've created. So I seen our shirt. Someone on NITV was wearing our it was the project, I think. Is it Narelle Jacobs? I think. Anyway, she wore this, and like people were ringing me going, "Turn the TV on, your shirt's on TV," So I was screenshotting the TV just so I could show Mum that someone is wearing our design. Yeah. So, but it's such a thrill, and what I love about Red Ridge is that it's not just for a couple of us. Like, so there's other people now that are designing stuff, and in fact, one of our designers, Deanna Plum, came to me only yesterday because Red Ridge are putting her design through their contacts on coffee. You know how you have the coffee cups, yeah. And so you have that design as the sleeve. So yeah, so it's pretty
so good. And there's like so many ways to use that artwork and get the story out there. Yeah. It's really interesting, I think.
Yeah.
So I guess what's next? Is there anything on the horizon for Red Ridge? Is there for Janeece? Yes. What's coming up? What can you see for the future, or what would you hope for the future?
Well, a couple of things. We've got the new line, the new collection, which we will showcase next year. So that's another 2 designers with their collection that'll be showcased through Red Ridge. Seawake itself is looking at a spiritual retreat that we're building out on our property. And so that's going to be a place for anyone who needs to chill out, a place we can do artist in residence. We've got a massive big outdoor movie screen. We're looking at developing it. We've got a horse program out there for the young people. People are actually, Nat and Amy from Avington, it's a property over in Blackwell, have donated these beautiful 2 ponies for the kids to ride. So like we've got ducks and chickens, but it's just a place to get back to nature because our kids are too how do you say, they don't get out anymore. Like, not like we did when we were kids. So, but once they're out at the farm, they just love it. So, yeah. So we're trying to recreate a bit of that.
Excellent.
Old-fashioned,
invest in the kids' future, I suppose, and hopefully bring the next generation up the way you.
Yes.
You were, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I only said the other day that when we were kids, you'd go to like pony club. You didn't need to own a horse. You could just rock up and learn. It was such a great club where you'd learn how to ride a horse. Whereas nowadays, it's too expensive. Like to get a good kids pony, you're looking at $25,000 plus, and then all the insurances for all these clubs and associations, especially with horses. So if we can do this little thing, and so every child should have an opportunity to ride a horse if they're in the bush. And it was funny because you know how you often say, "Oh, I just want to give my kids everything that I never had when I was a child." Well, I have a different attitude because I want to give the kids nowadays what I did have when I was a child. So that's CWAC's vision is to do some stuff that we used to do when we were kids, when we lived in the bush, because fun doesn't need to have a lot of money, really. So, yeah.
That's great. Well, thank you very much for coming along today. Very short notice to come along and answer some questions. I look forward to seeing what there is in the future. I might come out and have a ride on a horse.
Have a ride. You need to. Thank you, Aaron.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.